Personally, I've been using cannabis since the mid 90s, decades before I was diagnosed with ADHD. So it just all starts to kind of make sense.
And I never would have thought of myself as an anxious person before that, because I wasn't pulling off on the side of the road having panic attacks. I was very functional every day, but my mind was a very loud, unpleasant place to be.
Welcome to Living in the Weeds, a series that explores the lived experiences of neurodivergent people who consume cannabis, with your hosts, Jessica of Jessica Riley Writer and Lucy of Lucy's Natural Remedies.
Lucy, thanks for hopping on this call with me today.
You're welcome, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So this is a little introduction video that we are hopping on here for to talk about our new project, which is a cannabis and neurodivergency education series.
Yeah. So my name's Lucy. I'm the owner of Lucy's Natural Remedies. It's an education company that also offers CBD products. I was diagnosed with ADHD in the summer of 2021, so it's pretty recent. And yeah, it's been an adventure ever since.
I'm sure it was an adventure before that diagnosis too.
It was an adventure without a flashlight. Like, at least now I have a flashlight.
That is a good way to put it. So my name is Jessica. I am a writer and the owner of Jessica Riley Writer. I am not formally diagnosed. I am what I like to call peer-reviewed diagnosed. Back in either 2020 or 2021, an immediate family member of mine was diagnosed with ADHD, and we have a lot in common. So they pushed me to start looking at myself and reflecting on my own traits that were included in their diagnostic criteria. Around that time in 2021, I got a therapist who is formally diagnosed with ADHD and also encouraged me to start thinking about myself within the confines of an ADHD diagnosis. Without a formal diagnosis, I do just consider myself neurodivergent, but ADHD is where I seem to align best.
I like the term neurospicy because I feel like it gives it a nice little kick, if you will. And there's so many characteristics within the neurodivergent umbrella that overlap, right? And so I know that there are things that would fall typically on the autism spectrum that I align with, right? Particularly with sensory disorders and sensory sensitivity, if you will.
Yep.
So that is something that is, classic autism, but you can find that in ADHD. So I appreciate you calling it just neurodivergent, because sometimes you feel like, wait, what is this? What is going on?
We will have some other people on this series who identify as neurodivergent and are in the cannabis space talking about their experience. Some people who are scientists, some people who are very smart, very educated on this topic, and some people who, like us, who may not have master's degrees in it, but still have lived experience in it.
Yeah, so I think that this is going to be really helpful for people who have either already been officially diagnosed with some form of, neurodivergence, or are peer-reviewed as you are, or who are just thinking, hey, I want to know a little bit more about how this plant could even help with this type of situation, right? And we would be able to go through just real life experiences that we've gone through, from things like object permanence and time blindness to hormones, to even just the impact of the legality of the plant and how that has impacted society, right? Particularly for a neurodivergent world. I think that those are all topics that, if it interests people, they should stay tuned and come back and check things out, as well as the guests that we're going to have. I think that that's going to be really exciting.
I would agree with that. I think that consumer feedback and anecdotal reports have always really been the backbone of the cannabis community, because scientific research has always been 10, 20, 30 years behind what cannabis users know already. And I think that neurodivergency is vastly underrepresented in scientific studies. It's not something that researchers often account for. And so there's a large gap for neurodivergent people looking for cannabis information. And I think that it's talking about it, crowdsourcing information, looking for people who have lived experiences is a great way to start bridging the gap.
Personally, I've been using cannabis since the mid 90s, decades before I was diagnosed with ADHD. So it just all starts to kind of make sense. And the more people in our community start talking about this, I feel the more we'll start to learn and be able to find what actually is helping us and what isn't helping us. So I'm excited about this. Neurodivergence has been interesting. What for me was surprising is how I realized that I was addressing a lot of not the characteristics of my neurospiciness, but the symptoms, like the anxiety in particular, with cannabis, right? And like all of a sudden I could talk to people. All of a sudden I didn't feel like had like 50 thoughts in my head coming out. I only had like 10 thoughts in my head coming out. I actually tried to get diagnosed for ADHD when I started law school back in 2006. And the doctor told me that I did not have ADHD and that I was just a stoner. Because I told her that I smoked weed. And she's like, why do you think that helps you? How are you in class at law school taking notes, right? And, thinking that you can concentrate. And I was like, because it shuts everything else up in here, right? It quiets all those other voices so I can be present finally. And that was something that doctor just couldn't comprehend. But yeah, that's a little bit of how cannabis has helped me with my neurospiciness. How about you?
That was a perfect segue. I also, so when I first started using cannabis, it helped me realize that I was anxious, and I was in my early 20s by this point. I came to cannabis later in life than a lot of people do. I didn't try it till I was in college, and I didn't really start to understand it or like it until I was almost done with college.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was sitting there getting high for the first time consistently, like, oh, wait a second, it's really quiet in my head right now. Like, I don't have this carousel, this highway of thoughts speeding through my head. Like, is this what normal people feel like? Do I normally feel anxious all the time? And it was really like a light bulb moment for me when cannabis stopped all of those thoughts, all of those voices of like, wow, like how I feel a lot of the time probably isn't normal. And I never would have thought of myself as an anxious person before that, because I wasn't pulling off on the side of the road having panic attacks. I was very functional every day, but my mind was a very loud, unpleasant place to be.
Yeah, that is such a great description, a loud and unpleasant place to be. Okay, so I was introduced to cannabis my summer of senior year in high school. And it's a funny story because I did not know that blunts existed. And we were out and about in the tree, like there's trees and there are leaves. And I legitimately thought for like a decade of my life that this guy had taken a leaf from the ground and rolled up. Yeah, no. So my first was a blunt. My second one was I hit a bowl at a rave in Baltimore. And I remember taking a hit and turning to my friend and saying, I don't feel anything. And I said it in that tone. And she said, you're high. I was like, this is the dumbest experience I've ever had. Like, this is dumb. Like, this is boring. And then I got introduced to my best friend from college, and she had a 2-foot bong. And so I definitely got high then. And I met her my second semester of my freshman year. That summer, I moved across the street from her and our drug dealer. So it was very convenient. And it was like the summer of weed. And that would have been in 1996. And going forward, it was just like, that was my new lifestyle. That was who I was. I had like a little mini bong that it was like about this big, and I would carry it on a little sling that my friend had like put together, like a little nice bag to carry my bong, and she had her 2-foot bong, so we'd walk around to parties together, and like it was the best. We had a great college years, but I didn't really want to admit that it was helping me medicinally because I was afraid at that point that that meant I was a drug addict, right? I didn't want to say that, like, to say out loud to anybody or even to myself that the feelings of, like, what we were talking about earlier, of like quieting those voices down, like the uncomfortable loudness of our brain, I didn't want to share that with other people because that might mean something that I was afraid to talk about or afraid to think about at that point, because that would mean in a post Bush or post Reagan era, right, of just say no, thank you, Nancy Reagan, like, I was a drug addict, right? That I would start doing other things, that it would become a downward spiral into like me living as a homeless person on the street. Like, talk about, spiral negative thought thinking of a neurospicy person. Like, that has nothing to do with it. Right?
I first came into close contact with cannabis my senior year of high school when I went to a local community college. I made some friends who smoked and would come to class high, and I was like, how are you even functioning right now? Like, how can you pay attention? And I didn't try it then, but I normalized it a lot for me to have these people I was going to school with still, come to class and do their homework and drive home and like, oh wow, you're not a zombie on the couch. So my freshman year of college, I smoked my first bowl. But I love telling this story. When I first started smoking cigars because that was what my dad smoked.
Yeah.
And you smoke cigars differently than you smoke cigarettes and weed because you don't inhale the cigar smoke. You are not supposed to. It does not taste good. It does not feel good. You hold it and you release. But 16-year-old me did not know that, when you smoke cigars, you do it differently. That's just how I was taught to smoke. That's how I assumed you smoked everything. But you don't smoke everything that way.
No.
So I smoked this bowl with my friends and I was like, I don't feel anything. And they were like, you don't feel anything? I was like, I don't feel anything. Maybe I'm just immune to THC. Some people just don't react to it. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that again. Like, what a waste of time.
Kind of like me the first time. It's like, this is what it's like to get high.
Yeah. Like, I don't feel anything. Like, what are you guys on about? So my sophomore year, one of my friends was like, you're doing it wrong, right? And I was like, you can smoke things wrong? They're like, yeah, you can smoke weed wrong. It's like, oh, okay. So I got high for the first time and I was like, oh, I was doing it wrong. It took me several years to understand that, you I also tried cigarettes for a hot second and those didn't stick either because I didn't feel anything.
Yeah, no.
But that is a good thing.
That's we're okay with that.
Yeah. Rather the weed stuck. So it wasn't until really my junior year of college that I started smoking more consistently just because it was more readily available to me. I was a broke college kid. I was buying alcohol. I wasn't also going to buy weed. Like, who has the budget for that? It's one or the other.
Oh my God. Yeah.